Today's episode is brought to you by our sponsoring partner, the Campaign for Black Male Achievement. CBME has worked over the past decade to support Black men and boys to provide them the right word or the right person at the right time on their journey towards realizing their full potential. I value CBME's efforts, their focus, and the investments that they have made to define this new field for Black male achievement and to rewrite the narrative that we want for our country. If you've not yet done so, I urge you to visit tbpod.com/partners today and learn more about CBME and consider joining their membership and investing in the future of our Black men and boys.
You're listening to the Trailblazers.fm podcast, where we'll explore the stories of today's successful Black professionals, entrepreneurs, and leaders. Join us to access the knowledge, resources, and tools of these accomplished professionals and come away with the know-how, confidence, and motivation you'll need to blaze your trail. And now, here's your host, Stephen A. Hart.
Hello and welcome back to an all-new episode of the Trailblazers.fm podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Harts. Our guest today is no stranger to the podcast. We are talking with Miss Minda Harts. Minda is a dear friend of mine, a returning guest to the podcast. We're going to do something different today. Minda's book, her first book, is actually going live tomorrow. And I am so very happy and excited for her and wanted to actually do this episode to have her talk with our community. The book is called The Memo, What Women of Color Need to Know to Secure a Seat at the Table. And I think there's so much application to our community, which tilts towards women of color. More than 60% of our listeners are women of color. And so I think that, it would definitely be of tremendous benefit to all of my sisters out there for you to pick up a copy of this book, or for the brothers to buy a copy of the book for the women in your lives, or for other women that you might work with that might find value in it, or for yourself, just to educate yourself. And if you're like me and many of you are self-learners, I think there's a little bit of something in the book for everyone. But we'll talk a lot more about that in this conversation with Minda. Definitely invite you to go back and listen to past episodes that she's done on the podcast. You can hop on over to tbpod.com and search Minda Harts and learn a bit more there. This week, I'm so excited. I'm actually on vacation. At the point you're listening to this episode goes live on August 19th. I'm down in Florida enjoying a trip with my family at Disney World. So I hope to share. Hope that I can survive the vacation and come back excited and ready for this fall. This September, we're going to be showcasing an amazing series in partnership with our sponsor, the Campaign for Black Male Achievement. We have 5 amazing guests lined up for you. So I'm excited to share a little bit more as we pull closer. That said, let's go ahead and jump in and receive today's mission fuel from our featured trailblazer, returning trailblazer, Miss Minda Harts. Minda, welcome and thank you so much for returning to Trailblazers.fm.
Yes, it's being at home. I mean, one heart to another heart. So thank you for having me back. I know some are jealous. I get another round on the Trailblazers podcast.
It's crazy. Like, there are several people who have met on this podcast journey. A handful of people, probably 2 hands of just amazing friendships and bonds that I've made on this journey. But there are a handful of people as guests who came on. God bless Sean Dove, who connected us,
Yes.
some 3 years ago or so. And, Minda and I, we hold each other accountable in many ways and have conversations through chat on a weekly basis. And I'm always encouraged by your push. And we're going to talk a little bit about your book. But, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking, and there's so much that's happening in your world right now, right? The chaos of the season, and it can almost feel consuming at times. And I remember encouraging you, we were just talking about this, to be grateful rather than to allow the chaos to allow you to feel burdened in some way. So where we start every conversation off, tell us in the chaos of the season, why are you grateful and what are you most grateful for right now?
I'm so grateful that God has given me the desires of my heart. The things that we work hard for, the things that we say we want. Sometimes we might just get it if we're crazy enough to believe it. And I'm just so grateful that He entrusted me with this time, this gift that He's placed in my spirit to be able to give it to the world. And so I'm just grateful that He trusted me enough to be able to produce this next body of work that will hit the world here shortly.
Yes, with a force. I love it. Minda, one would think that you've got some Jamaican in your blood because, girl, you got so many titles. I like 7 job titles.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
For those who have not listened to prior episodes with Minda, there are at least 2 that I can think of. You're an entrepreneur and founder. You're an adjunct professor. You're a speaker about to deliver your first TEDx. And now you've about to add published author to the mix. Your book debuts on August 20th, the week this episode actually goes live. And the title of the book is The Memo, What Women of Color Need to Know to Secure a Seat at the Table. Tell me a little bit about what inspired the book, and let's go from there.
Yeah. So, when I first met you, Stephen, it's just such a pleasure to be back because you have seen quite a bit of my journey and from small company to growing it to book. And as I often say, success is not a solo sport. It took Sean to introduce me to you and, for us to make that connection. And then we've been able to help each other on the journey. But for me, it started back when I was in corporate America. And I had a situation as being one of the only women of color, Black women in the workplace, where I thought that situation had buried me, Stephen. But what I didn't know is that it actually planted me. It planted me to be able to produce the seeds that God wanted me to produce. And so a situation in my life where I was going through a lot of microaggressions, some workplace bullying, all of those things where I thought, how did I get to this place? I don't know that I could continue on. I could be resilient, but I was able to, turn those lemons into lemonade and create my business, The Memo, because I realized that I was suffering at the time in isolation, but it started to change my way of thinking. Are there other Black women? Are there other women of color that are going through some of the same things that I'm going through? And I don't want them to feel like they're alone in this. I don't want them to question if they're worthy enough, if they have what it takes, just because the narrative has told us differently. And so I created the company, The Memo, to address those things. And then from there, community and conversation and curriculum. Over the next few years, I just now have a book coming out, and it's just so weird. It's The Power of Relationships. And there wasn't a book really that addressed the needs of women of color in the workplace and talked about our experiences. And I met with a publisher, and about a year after that time period, I had a book deal, and August 20th, the book comes out. It's my baby, and I'm just so excited for women of color to finally read about their stories being told between the pages.
There's so many open doors. So let's take 2 steps back. You talked about, starting your company, The Memo. Bring me back here. Was The Memo founded while you were still in corporate America?
The Memo was founded while I was still in corporate America, and not a lot of people know that. I actually worked my day job for almost 4 years before I was able to transition full-time into The Memo. But when I started The Memo, I never intended to leave my day job. It was something that I just thought would be, I want to be able to help other women that look like me. I want to create this legacy of conversation and more women in the executive suite. And then God said, oh no, girl, I got other plans for you. And eventually I had the opportunity to leave my day job and work full time at The Memo, but it was organic process and a lot of resilience and staying true to the content that I wanted to talk about. Because when I started my company in 2015, and I was talking a lot about women of color in the workplace, there wasn't a lot of conversation about that. It was more geared toward all women. And so now you see a lot more content geared toward women of color. But when we were out trying to fundraise, I would hear investors saying, no, there's not room for this. That's too niche. But women of color, yeah, absolutely. And had I stopped there, there'd be no book.
And this is what I kind of wanted to opinion on. If investors have their voice and family and friends have a different kind of voice, but what were you hearing from women of color?
what I was hearing from them is that they finally felt seen, because oftentimes going through some of these microaggressions, these biases, being overlooked for promotions and opportunity, not having a seat at the table, but working just as hard, if not harder than others, you start to question yourself. You start to think that maybe you're not worthy. And finally, me putting out the content and certain women finding it, they realize, wow, I needed to know that everything was okay. I needed someone to confirm that what I was experiencing in the workplace wasn't something I created on my own.
So like when you started things, because I know you did events and you did quite a number of like live events on occasion, right? With the memo. Was that where? And then you're also like loved and have an amazing tribe on Twitter. Where was the energy directed initially? Was it to digital and digital kind of, community, or did things kind of groundswell from the actual live events that you're putting together?
I'm so happy that you are asking these questions, because what a lot of people, when you create something, sometimes there's various iterations of the product. Yeah. And when I started the memo initially back in 2015, at the end of July, I put out my first, what we call Memo Mondays. It's every Monday, a newsletter that goes out, a memo. And I have not missed a Monday since 2015, if you can imagine that now. So I started with the content because I wanted to see if there was a group of people who would identify with what I'm talking about. And so the memo was just a newsletter every Monday. I'm still working my day job, but I'm like, let me commit to this one thing. I cannot do much more. My bandwidth, I traveled a lot for my day job. So I said, every Monday, I'm going to write about my experiences. And the tribe started to come slowly but surely. And then from there, that was July 2015. And then in the summer of 2016, I launched career boot camps. So as I started to build the community in the newsletter, then we went to live events in New York City, and a couple times a month, we'd host what we call career boot camps. It was 4 hours. We do salary negotiation, career transitioning, self-advocacy. And so doing that the whole summer, we had about 400 women come through career boot camps, just doing it a couple of times. And from there, we just continue to build, and be consistent. Again, talking about women of color, doing the memos. And then we built career boot camps in person. By the end of that year, they went online. And then we created an event series where maybe you don't feel like you need the career boot camps, but you just want to talk about conversation. And we went to our event series called After Six. And then we had people like Amanda Seales from Issa's show Insecure. She's been a guest, and various others. And so we just created this community and curriculum. And now the memo, we still do those things, but we also now partner with companies working with their women's groups and creating content and curriculum. So Stephen, if you would have asked me where we'd be right now, I couldn't have guessed. I had no roadmap, but I just kept building, and with no funding, but we just kept going.
Wow. And so through this journey, were you kind of directed by just where your spirit led you? Were you being directed, especially to the book now and where we find ourselves right now? Or was it always kind of you leaning into the voice of the tribe?
It was leaning into the voice of the tribe, I would say, because as I continued, and let me be clear on this, I started out as a solopreneur, but then I brought on my co-founder, Lauren. And so then we were able to both build a little bit faster, but we leaned into the conversation. So many women reaching out saying, oh, I needed this. I needed just a community. I needed to be seen. And so even though we weren't making a lot of money, we realized that the intention and the impact was way more. So we just kept going. And every time we kept going, even with $10 in the bank account, something good would happen. Like a Forbes article would come and we'd get a little more traction and a little more people. And then a good speaking event would come up and we'd get a little more traction and every little bit. And it wasn't until, and I have to tell you this because sometimes when people see you, because you've been in Fast Company or you've been in these different articles, but it wasn't until 2019 that I was actually able to pay myself something and Lauren. And I kept telling her, just stay with me. I don't want you to leave this until I'm able to pay you, girl. You put in too much work. And it wasn't a lot, but it felt really good because we turned a profit, but it took time. But we knew that women of color, Black women needed it. And I'm just glad that we continue to be resilient.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So the book is getting so much love. Talk to me about kind of where we are. You're about to launch, right? By the time this comes out, it's actually going to come out the day before the book launches. So again, I'm going to just keep pushing the book while we're talking, but the book is called The Memo, What Women of Color Need to Know to Secure a Seat at the Table. Women, grab a copy right now. Brothers, grab a copy for your women. I'm pushing this hardcore because Minda is, again, one of my bona fide friends and sisters and somebody that I truly believe in. And I just know that you're doing some amazing things and will continue to do some amazing things in the months and the years to follow. And this is just, one of those stepping stones on a journey. Talk to us a little bit because you're speaking to women of color. And I love that. And, we always have this discussion about niching in. The brand guy in me is always telling you to own that, right? And own the group that you've been leaning into and not worry about trying to generalize too much. But you're speaking to women of color in the book. But I think, too, you're directing some of that energy to those leading women of color. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. As Aya says, there's riches in the niches. And so when I started, people kept telling me there's no way you're going to be able to do anything, no traction, because you're so focused on women of color. We even had one investor offer us money, lots of money, if we changed our focus to all women. And we didn't. And it was a struggle, right? But I knew in my heart that we were on the right path, and it's definitely paying off in dividends in different ways right now. So I'm glad that I stayed the course. But we talk about the future of work a lot, like on LinkedIn and social media. And the future of work is understanding how your talent views the workplace and how they experience it. And as leaders or those who are managing diverse talent, we should understand, how do we invest? How do we get the most out of our talent, and how much of people's talent are you willing to use? And if you don't understand their experiences, then it's hard for you to get the most out of them and help them achieve their goals and obviously achieve your goals, and everybody wins because you're helping the company's bottom line. So I'm pushing this book. Yes, it's the experiences of women of color, Black and brown women in the workplace, in my experience, but also, how often do you read about the experiences of your talent, right? We often read business books about those who have made it and done all these really amazing things, but what about the people on the ground? What about the people that we get to pour into, hearing their experiences? And I have a lot of content, and as Stephen mentioned, I'm really active on Twitter, and I have so many men hit me up saying, I just listened to the podcast. You might not be talking to me specifically, but this is working. This is really helping me. And I'm saying, a lot of us have similar experiences. And so men, all you men listeners, the memo is for you too. Okay. Don't get it twisted. It's for everybody. And so I hope that you'll go and get the book, because we're talking about money in the book. How do you negotiate your salary? Self-advocacy. We all need to bet on ourselves. And I think, and build your squad, build your team. And we all need tools in our toolkit. And I think hearing from diverse voices help us become better leaders.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I know you probably think about this question a lot. I do in my own journey. But of all the amazing Black women that are alive right now, who are smart and hardworking, professional women of color, why do you think God chose you as the person to bring this book and, dare I say, movement to life, right? Because what you started right here is absolutely a movement, right? Why Minda Harts?
Yeah, I ask myself that question all the time. But it goes back to the gratitude question. And, I'm a very big person on legacy. What's the legacy? What are you leaving behind? Who are you helping? And I do see myself as that person that's planting all these seeds so that we continue to help each other. And I think God maybe chose me because he knew I had the heart, a servant leader's heart, the heart that's going to go the distance for my girls. And whether we know each other or not, we're all in this together. And I'm just so thankful, because he could have chose anybody, but he chose me, Stephen, and I don't take that lightly. And so I will run with it. And when it's the next person, I will hand the baton off and let them do it. But I don't want to leave the workplace the way that it is now. I want to do so much more for your daughter and for the daughters to come, so that they have agency when they sit down.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's switch gears for a second, because one of the things I love and respect about, and again, I've poured in as much as I can from my knowledge base into kind of helping where I can. But some of the things I love that you do organically in building social community. You are hardcore about your Twitter, right?
Yes.
And you're actually very good with LinkedIn as well. Talk to me about Twitter. How are you able to build community on Twitter the way you have, and why Twitter?
Yeah, so Twitter was one of those things where I had a Twitter account for years and didn't do anything with it. It was just one of those things where I was like, I don't know about that platform. But what I realized was as we build our brands, there has to be a social media platform that you get busy on, you get hype on. That's like your jam, right? And I just didn't have the capacity to make all the social media channels my jam. And so I said, which one do I think that I could be the most effective and really engage with people? Because I'm a very much a relationship person. And I feel like if you use Twitter in the right way, you could really get down to some really good content. And I think there's a lot of people who are looking for the answers, who want to know how do they invest in themselves. And so I use Twitter in a way to ask the questions that people want to give advice to. And it creates this dialogue about leadership and management in the workplace. And I love Twitter because I can still talk about issues that face women of color, but then I might another day broaden it to a leadership question. And then you get all of these different voices chiming in. And I love the power that Twitter has to be able to do that. And I think LinkedIn, but I have to say that Stephen has pushed me to really pop on LinkedIn even more because I wasn't using it the way that I probably could have. So I appreciate him for pushing me to that. But I think you have to find what works for you, and only you know that. But pick that place and play there.
And I'm giving you a break because the book is coming out, but I want those videos.
I
know. You're doing really good with them. I need to even get to that measure of consistency with videos on LinkedIn. I was sharing with Minda that LinkedIn is a great platform. And this is just wisdom for everyone listening. But, LinkedIn right now, just about any social platform has to filter through its algorithm to decide, what's noise, because there's so many people posting content. But in the case of LinkedIn right now is pretty much, I believe, research I'd looked at in the spring of this year, and we're in 2019 when this episode goes live. They were pretty much giving up about 9 billion impressions a week. There are only 3 million people posting content on a weekly basis. So 3 million people are getting 9 billion impressions on a weekly basis on LinkedIn. So it's free traffic. And then on top of that, of the 3 million people, other 3 million pieces of content that's being posted, probably 1% of that is video. So the people who are posting video are getting crazy traction. And so I challenged Minda one day. I was like, hey, start dropping some videos. And even amongst several of my peers, we are challenging ourselves to do more video on LinkedIn. And so if you're listening, I'm going to encourage you to do the same and just share your heart, share your wisdom, share your knowledge with the world and get that message out there and build that thought leadership. Minda, what else is on the deck right now? I know you have a TEDx coming up.
Yeah, man. It's so crazy because I know when this episode drops, the next day my book comes out, and then the day after that I do the TEDx. So I keep asking myself every morning when I'm thanking God for waking me up, like, why did you decide that you wanted to do these things? But I'm leaning into it. So the TED Talk comes out. If you're in Harlem, August 21st, it's the first TEDx in Harlem. So, and I live in Harlem, so it means so much to me. But, and I'll be back. I teach at NYU as well, and I'll be back in the spring, teach a leadership course there. So let's just all continue to lift each other up and be the best leaders that we can be. And that means investing in ourselves. And that means that you need to go and pre-order, get you a copy of the book so it can help add that to your toolkit.
Who should get a copy of the book?
Well, as you said, you should get one for yourself. You know what I'd love? One of the things that some of my tribe on Twitter, people I'd never even met, they did these book drawings for the book. And so they're like, oh, I'm going to buy 5 copies and give them away as gifts. So if you are a manager or you aspire to be a manager, buy one for yourself and then buy some for your team. If you're a woman of color, give it to your manager. Maybe you don't have the agency right now to say some of the things that you want to say. This is the best gift you can give them. Let me do the hard work for you.
That's right. That's right. How have the conversations been in some of the rooms that you've done some readings?
Yeah, so I've been doing a mini tour at corporations. some law firms doing readings of the book. And it's so funny because before I get there, I had one gentleman say, we're kind of concerned, what are you going to say? We haven't done a good job. And I said, I'm not here to burn the place down. I just want to you all to think through leadership in a different way, think outside of yourself. And it's been so great, Stephen, like going into these spaces because they're learning things that they didn't know before that they hadn't considered, right? And then to see the couple of women of color that are in the room that light up knowing that, wow, I needed this book. I'm glad that it's here. And so for me, it's already a bestseller because it's resonating with the people that it's supposed to, and it's opening up the eyes of those who didn't even realize that this was a problem.
When you talk about the book because I'm sure not very many people have actually gotten a hard copy of the book yet, but have members of your family access the book? Like have your mom and aunties and...
So I was really intentional about not giving it to my family because I wanted them to be surprised. But I was in California a few months ago and my mom and my grandmother were out there as well. And so we were all sitting around. And so I busted the book out and I read a few chapters of it to them and they were loving it and surprised because some of the things that I write about in the book, I did not talk to my family about. Because when you're going through some issues, sometimes with racism, sometimes you get in these, you start to think, am I the problem? Or you start to question yourself. And so I just felt really down in a bad space in some of the things. So it was very emotional to talk to my family about some of the things that I had going on. But then it opened up this really beautiful conversation where my grandmother talked about some issues that she experienced in the 50s, in the 60s. And then another aunt, she chimed in and we just started having this conversation about the workplace. And I hope that it will also open up these conversations with family because, as people of color, as Black people specifically, we don't like to tell our business, right? So sometimes I think opening up this dialogue on some of the issues that we face is important to talk it out for that healing.
And I've said this to you many times before. I think, I'm claiming it bestseller right now. But, one of the things I really believe that as the book gets out there, we're going to have a lot of book clubs, women, coming together and having that conversation, whether it's family or girlfriends or coworkers. And so I'm going to encourage that too, for the women listening, encourage this in those book clubs, join Minda's book club over at mindaharts.com and, help that groundswell, share that book up. So
yeah, there's something in it for everybody. I truly believe it. And the early reviews that we've received back have been very, very good. And I just feel even so grateful that people were able to see that this is a needed book.
So this is a conversation that we literally decided we were going to do today. And so Minda and I are just like chatting it up with really no framework. But anything else you wanted to share before we wrapped up?
I just want to thank the Trailblazers community. I want to thank you, Stephen, because part of being a Black professional is, having the tools, the resources, the community. And I know that your Trailblazers podcast has been so helpful to me and to others that are in the community. So thank you for your work and for the legacy that you've created in community. So big ups to you.
Appreciate it. Go out and get the book. Thank you, Minda.
Thank you, Stephen.
I'm Steve Hart, and you've been listening to the Trailblazers.fm podcast. If you're not yet doing so, consider following Trailblazers.fm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and feel free to connect with me over on LinkedIn. Whenever you're posting stories or social media posts about Trailblazers.fm, be sure to use the hashtag TBPod and hashtag Mission Fuel. We'll be able to see you and I'll be able to show some love. And in case you're not aware, our show notes for all our episodes can be found on our website over at tbpod.com. Now, if today was your first time listening, I just want to say big ups and enough respect for checking us out. You've made this Jamaican guy really happy that you're here with us today. And I'd love your help with keeping this Black excellence flowing each and every week. So if you haven't yet subscribed, hop on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Search Trailblazers.fm and subscribe, rate, and review us there. Be sure to browse through some of our past episodes. There are more than 150 published episodes now, and a little something is out there for everyone to help keep the knowledge flowing. We grow when you, as part of our Blazer Nation community, shares and invites your friends and family to listen to an episode you think might impact them most. We believe that someone listening to these inspiring stories are going to be moved to make significant changes that have generational impact for many others, both now and well into the future. Don't miss next week's episode. New episodes are released each and every Monday morning at 5 a.m. Eastern. Blazer Nation, go out today and find a way to rise above, go way beyond, and keep blazing your trail.